Okay, after a long break, we are back in Shiurim, now that we are also back into a new topic in Shulchan Aruch, and that is Dinei Bar Metzra. Dinei Bar Metzra begin in the middle of a Siman, Siman Kuf Ayin Hey. Which is interesting, usually a topic begins in the beginning of a Siman, but over here it begins in the middle of a Siman. It's essentially a continuation to the previous Simanim, but it's a new topic within the previous Simanim, because the previous Simanim were dealing with Chalukas Shutfus, Chalukas Karka, and when people are partners in the Karka, when people are Yarshim, and the din of Gud or Yagud, etc. So now we'll move weiter. After, chronologically speaking, after there is a Chalukah done, so each person has his property, or then one person could decide he wants to sell it. One person decides he wants to sell it, becomes the shaila of Dina de Bar Metzra. Dina de Bar Metzra is one of the most common cases that come in front of Rabbanim, one of the most misunderstood topics. A lot of people think they have a claim in Bar Metzra, and most of the times they don't. You look in the Siman, you will see you have tens of Sa'ifim. Most of the Sa'ifim, almost each Sa'if has a loophole. That means to be able to get a real Echte Bar Metzra, it's a high bar. It exists, but between what the Shulchan Aruch gives you as loopholes and what the Achronim give as loopholes, and if you go back in the Rishonim also, it comes out that essentially the Siman is more about when there is no Bar Metzra than when there is Bar Metzra. Yeah, so what is the Yesod of Bar Metzra? The Yesod of Bar Metzra is that one person sells something, sells a karka to his part of the karka, Yoresh or a shutaf sells it to somebody else. Then, in the first seif is a shutaf is two shutfim, and one shutaf sells his part of the karka. Then the other shutaf could go and remove the loikeach from the karka by saying, you are sitting on my border, I will not be able to find this size of land attached to my border in any other way, shape, or form. I need it for expansion. You can find this size property elsewhere. So you have to sell it to me. Shaila becomes what happens if the other person is also a matzrin. That means if on one side you have a shutef in the karka, and on the other side of the karka you have a matzrin, and the purchaser was the matzrin, so the mechaber says B'loshen Yeshayimrim that the shutef is still mesalik the other matzrin. And even though the mechaber says that it's Yeshayimrim, the Smeh points out right away that nobody's chaylik on it. It seems like the Ramah is machriya like the Yeshayimrim. Everybody is machriya like the Yeshayimrim when it comes to this din that a shutef in this karka seems like comes before a matzrin. Now, what's the reason why a shutef comes before a matzrin? So, if you look in the Tur brings the name of the Rosh. But being that we're talking about that there was no division of property yet, it's an interesting way of defining it. These were two shutfim in a karka that was not divided, as opposed to what we thought until the second. So the shutef has a part in the karka that was sold. So this guy, there were two shutfim in the karka, each one's 50-50, and then one shutef goes and sells his 50% share to somebody else. Each part of this karka is owned by both. And therefore, since there was no chalukah, therefore a shutef is koidim to a matzrin. So a matzrin could say, I am next to it. The shutef says, it's mine. It's nothing to do with being next to it. I own part of this. But if there was already a chalukah done, so it's mashma from the Rosh, that obviously you can't be misalikim. Yeah, that's what the Rosh says. The Tur brings the name of the Rosh, but the Ramah doesn't say this b'chlal. The Ramah just says that the Mechaber doesn't say about the Yeshayim that a shutef, that it depends if the shutef was chaylik or not. And and whether he has a part in the karka, doesn't have a part in the karka, whether there was chalukah, or there was no chalukah. Yeah, and the Taz explains, no, that it's obvious that the Ramah would not, the Ramah is following the opinion of the Rosh, and it's obvious that we're talking about koidem chalukah. Now, like I mentioned before, the Mechaber says that as a Yeshayimrim. The Smeh says there's nobody who disagrees on the Mechaber, so why are you saying it as a Yeshayimrim? So the Shach Farantfer happens to be, you could find a detail that disagrees in it, which is in Rashi, that Rashi holds that this din, that a shutaf is koidem to a matzra, is only if bo ke'echad, if they both came in one shot to do the barmat, to purchase a property, and then we say the matzrin is koidem, because then we say the shutaf is koidem. But if the matzrin came first to purchase it, then the shutaf does not, because it seems from Rashi that they both have equal rights to it. And what the Ramah is trying to tell you is, the Mechaber is trying to tell you is, that even though you might think they have equal rights, no, a shutaf has rights more than the matzah. There is an interesting maharik, since we're talking about the shutfim, and the Beis Yosef brings it, the Dakei Moshe Aruch also brings it, that if you have two shutfim in a store, and each one they're not shutfim that each day they're working together, but rather they're shutfim the 6 days in a week, and they split them. Each person has 3 days. One day this person, one day that person, and nobody goes into the store while the other person is the other person's day. So they're not considered shutfim l'inyan of this, because nobody has. It follows the same logic. Nobody has a chelik in the other person. There's already somewhat of a chalukah. Yes, the store is owned by both, but the days is divided. So if there is somebody else who purchases those 3 days, then the shutaf can't come and remove him. If the matzrin comes and says that he wants to buy it, then you can't. If the other person buys it, then this shutaf cannot be masalik the lekeach. Now, what happens? A general rule: if after the matzrin comes, so the seller wanted to sell it, and soon we're going to get into this. Just to give you a general rule over here, there's a discussion. Who are the baldinim over here? Is the moicher the baldin with who? Is the matzrin is a baldin with the lekeach, not really with the moicher. Yes, there's a svara that you could block the moicher, but the matzrin is a baldin with the lekeach. So, and the moicher has no obligation to sell to anybody; he could keep it, and the lekeach has no obligation to buy. When does the din of bar metzra kick in? After the lekeach purchased, then the matzah could take him to Bezdin and take it back from him. That is just a general rule. I'm simplifying it because there are certain details and exceptions to it, but that's the idea over here. So if the matzrin, if the seller is making a deal with the buyer, a buyer, independent buyer, comes the matzrin and says, "Hey, I'm the matzrin, I want to buy it." The lekeach, the seller can, and the seller now comes. This is quite often if the seller hates the neighbor, and he says, "I'm not selling it anymore. I changed my mind. I'm keeping the property." So the shach says that the seller could retract his decision as long as there was no kinyan made. If there was a kinyan made, it's mashma from the shach. He can no longer. What? That he what?
That he cannot back up.
It's after a kinyan. The shach is explaining what it is. It must be after a kinyan. Because after a kinyan, the moicher is already out of the picture. Essentially. And the lekeach now becomes a baldin of the matzah. And that's what the Ramah, that's essentially what's mashma from the Ramah later. Yeah, and like I said before, it's the Yesod of Bar Metzrah. We're talking, the original classic Bar Metzrah is 2 fields, and each person has 1 field, and it's a smaller field. And if I want to expand my business, I want to expand my fields, it's easier for me to have the same tractors going on a wider field rather than having 1 field here and 1 field on the other side of town. So for me, it's a Yoshev HaTov as the matzah. For you, you could take a tractor somewhere else and do the same thing over there. And that is what Chachamim were misaken, that as a toiva for the owners of the fields. That becomes a whole discussion in Achroinev. This also applies to houses. We'll see it much later in the Siman. We have Bar Metzrah in Batim Shitta Beinu Tam. It's a known Shitta because you're not plowing tractors through your houses. Is there this mashma might be Bar Metzrah when it comes to stores? There is, because stores is a business. So if you have a narrow store, you want to expand your store, you get first rights to it next to it, etc. You'll see a lot of it down the line. Erech HaShulchan brings an interesting thing. Erech HaShulchan and Ois Hey brings a very interesting nekuda over here. The first point that he brings about Bar Metzrah, that he says if a person wants to go to Eretz Yisrael, and that's why he's selling his field, Eretz Yisrael. We do not say Bar Metzrah. Why is that? Because why is he selling? He wants to move to Eretz Yisrael today, tomorrow, the next day. Every buyer is going to come, is going to look at it, and you have a guy next door standing over there with a sign that says Bar Metzrah, bin de Matzah. So he's blocking him from selling. Therefore, he'll not be able to sell, or he'll be able to sell in a very big loss. And so therefore, in such a thing, there is no Bar Metzrah. Yeah. And it could be that the same thing applies if somebody has a judgment sitting on his head, or something which is a very time pressuring, or somebody just bought a bigger house somewhere else, yeah, and now he can't hold 2 mortgages, v'chulu, and he will have a hard time finding a client because of that. Now, back to the shutav thing, yeah? Now just discuss, does Bar Metzrah apply to metaltalin also? Shutav, not Bar Metzrah, that means the shutav is koidem, because we said the shutav is koidem by karka. Now what happens is, if you have metaltalin, I'm a shutav with you in something which is metaltalin, in tools, cars, things of that sort. It's not a karka. Is there a din of Bar Metzrah or not? So the Erech Lechem in the beginning, Ois Aleph says that it's mashma from the Mechaber that there is Bar Metzrah / shutaf koidem and these. Why? Because the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say shemachar karka, it says shemachar chelkoi in the shutfus. Machar chelkoi means he sold his part in a partnership, regardless of what it is. And this is in disagreement with the Bach, because the Tur says the same lashon, shemachar chelkei. The Bach clearly over there says it's only talking about karka, but Erech Lechem says no, machar chelkei means chelkei, and anything. And the Erech Lechem says it's not my own idea. The Marik says that, the Mabit says that. Elamai, the Radbaz disagrees with it, and the Radbaz says that it only applies to karka like the Bach, but Erech Lechem seems to say that it applies also to metaltalin.
What's the sort to say it's karka?
Because Bar Metzrah is a chiddush. There's takonas chachamim. You don't want to expand takonas chachamim more than what it is. What's the takonas chachamim? We saw the Smeh brings it that it's toiva lebala sada, that this, all the sadas should be together. What is that toiva? So, and then based on that we add that a shutaf has more right in the matzah. So now you're going to take the bar metzra plus the added layer of shutaf and apply it to a box of tools. It's too far-fetched from the original takana. Well, this hayoshev hatoiv is something which doesn't fit within the parameters of normal business practices. So you want to do something which is out of the box, out of the standard. So only what Chachamim established. Can't go further than that. The Pamoinez of brings a lot of times the Pamoinez of, as opposed to some of the other mefarshim, the Pamoinez of brings like interesting things that happened around. He brings piskei dinim from stories, like this happened in this place, this happened in that place. So he brings from the city of Sali in Morocco. Now, the way it worked over there was, we're talking about shutfim. The way it worked over there was that all the Yidden lived in Chatzeres. You know what a Chatzer is? And all the Jews, and let's say there was 2 shutfim in a house, and there was also, let's say there was like houses that are double, and one person owned the top floor, one person owned the bottom floor, but there was in the Chatzer was a bunch of these double houses. Everybody was a shutef in the common areas, but then there was a shutef within the house, and a shutef, and the general shutef around it. So now, happens to be that you have 2 shutfim, Reuven and Shimon are shutfim in house number 2. And then you have Levi, who is a shutef in the same Chatzer, but not in house number 2, he lives in house number 3, in the house number 5. And comes Levi and buys Reuven's chelek in house number 2. So he's a shutef with him in the Chatzer, and a shutef with him in the bayis. So he says that over there they paskin that the matzren who is in the house cannot be masalik the person who bought it who is within the same Chatzer. Why? Because they're shutfim in the same Chatzer, even though he's not a shutef in the same house, he cannot be mesalikim. This is Zayd ben Gepaskent in the city of Sali in Morocco. He doesn't bring anybody who's chaylik on it. No, but he says the idea of, because they are, which brings out a very interesting point. You're shutef with him in karka, which is relevant to this house, but you're not shutef in the same house, and you're ready enough for it. And we'll see other poskim which deal with similar discussions, which might be different. The Erech Shai brings a bach. Shalos Chuvas Abach HaYeshanas, Siman Yutches, that you have 2 brothers, they yashin together, a house in the Chatzer. Yeah. And then there was some other guy who rented the house rented 1 floor of the house from the shutfim, was a renter. Now behind the Chatzer there's a shul. And then came this guy who was renting from the brothers, and he's there, and they know him, and they're comfortable with him, and when they're ready to sell, they went and they sold it to the guy who was to the renter. Now, you see later going to see, there's a shaila if a renter has a din of bar metzra or not. Yeah? But over here, he bought it. Now, comes the shul and says, we are the bar metzra. And the Bach answered over there that even though Yisachar is more of a matzin than them, because he was already living over there, the Kahal has more of a schus to purchase it because they're shutfim. How are they shutfim? The sellers are residents in this city, in this village, and they are shutfim with the shul. The shul is a shutfis of them, so they are shutfim with the shul. They're shutfim in the shul. So the shul is now a shutf with the sellers, and a shutf is koydem to a matzah. That's how the Bach pass. Shul is behind. That's even if the shul is not behind the house. But we're talking about that the shul is behind the house.
Then if they became shutf, could they have membership in the shul?
Yeah. In those days, the shul was owned by it's talking about the shul based on Sharabim, not Shayachid. Comes Erech Shai and says this makes absolutely no sense. He says, now you're going to come and tell me that if you have a Matzrin that doesn't live in town, yeah, a Matzrin who owns a field in Long Island, and he lives in Brooklyn, but he owns a field in Long Island, and next to him is another field for sale. Yeah, and then there's somebody who lives in Long Island but is not a Matzrin. And you're going to say that if he's going to sell it to the Matzrin of the field, could come anybody from the city and say, hey, we're all shutfim, because we learned a few simanim ago, 10 simanim ago, that there are things that Bnei Ha'ir are all shutfim one with another. Right? They're responsible for the doors, for the security, for a bunch of things that the Bnei Ha'ir are all shutfim. So they all became shutfim, so a shutf is kodim to a Matzrin. This makes absolutely no sense. Not only that, you want to go shutfim, so Yisachar is also Yisachar. The purchaser who bought the house from the two brothers is a shutf in the shul through being a shutf in the city things, he's a shutf with the sellers in the city, just like the shul is a shutf with the sellers in the shul. So why would a shul have a dinkdime? He says it makes no sense. Elamai, you must say that the Bach says that there's a difference between a shutfus in shul to a shutfus of Bnei Ha'ir, to a shutfus in business, to a shutfus in land. Each shutfus has to be different. And the Bach, for whatever reason, feels that a shutfus in the shul is stronger than other shutfus. And he says, regardless, this makes no sense. The halacha doesn't fit with the smell later on, because the smell later on says that a shutf in one thing cannot take out a lekeach unless he's a shutf in the same thing. And the Bach himself on the Tur later on says that somebody who is a shutf in business cannot not a shutf in this specific property cannot be moitzi a matzin, and therefore the Erech Shai says it's clear the shaila of the Bach that the shul has no right to remove him, and that doesn't count as a shutfus. And shutfus is only that they're fully shutfim in this specific property that is being disputed. So that is essentially Sif Hey, the discussion about shutfim. Come Sif Vav, Sif Zayin, beginning the dinim of actual bar metzra without shutfim. How does the matzrin remove the lekeach? Comes the lekeach purchased it. Lekeach was an innocent lekeach, or attempts to be innocent, and the matzrin comes and wants to take it from him. First thing is we're talking about mechire. And Sif Yitches are going to be talking about matana. The matana doesn't work. There's no thing. Second thing I mentioned to you already, that the baldin of the matzrin is not the moicher, it's not the seller, it's the koine, it's the buyer. That's pretty clear from the Smeh, Sifkat and Zayin. So now, if the buyer goes and buys the property, which is sitting on the border, goes the matzrin, which is sitting on the border, pays him, tells him, give me a receipt how much you paid, whatever your cost was, full cost, yeah, no bonuses, no nothing, full cost of what it was, how much you paid him, here's a check for the amount, weiter gefahren. Later in the Siman you're going to be discussing if he brings the money later, how many days does he have, if it was 3 days away, but not getting into it right now, talking about the classic example. He comes with a bag of cash and says, you paid $100,000 for this property, cost you a few more dollars in taxes, what's your total? 103, here's a bag of 103, give me the land. That's it, it's done. Now, the Shalas Utshuvas Divri Malkiel Chelekalav Siman Tzadik Ches and the Marashag Chel Gimel Siman Kuf Yud Zayin right away point out the koine has no obligation to walk around to the matzronim before purchasing and saying, hey, I'm looking to purchase, are you interested in buying it so you don't have to give me the headache? He doesn't have to. He's allowed, he's not a partner to the discussion until after he purchases and the matzron comes over to him. That means the matzrin has the obligation of initiating contact after the sale is completed. Up until then, the buyer doesn't have to go ask anybody around, the neighbors around. Yeah. Now, another important point that's relevant to Bar Metzra, which the Smeh over here points out, that this only applies, the din of Bar Metzra only applies if there's not going to be a specific loss by selling to, if there's no specific loss to the koine by selling to the matzah. Now the Mechaber continues, he says, Bar Metzra is even if the purchaser is a Talmid Chacham or a relative, so obviously you want to sell to him. And the Matzrin is Amoritz, not a relative, doesn't make a difference. The Matzrin is still Koidem, still comes first. The Rama over here says based on what we mentioned when we discussed the Shach in the previous Sif, that if the seller says, I'm not interested in selling to the Matzrin, I don't want him, whatever reason he has with him, and he doesn't have a real valid reason for it. The Mishpat Shalom says doesn't really have a real valid reason. So we're going to see sometimes there is a valid reason. What's a valid reason? The Mishpat Shalom doesn't go into it, but the other Achreinim will discuss it, explain it. For example, if there's a specific, he owes him a favor, there's specific to the buyer, there's specific Tevas Hana that he had from him, he owed him for something else. There was not that stam out of the blue, he says, I don't like you, and therefore, I don't want to sell to you. He can't say, I hate you, and that's why I don't want to sell to you. Why? You're moving out of town, that's why you're selling, right? So, you just want to take Nakam on him, you're not losing anything from it. Mashenkin, if I have a person who I owe favors to, did a lot of good for me for whatever reason it was, or somebody, my family doctor, the rabbi, could be selling to a shul. And Chas Yitzchak mentions about someone who sells the property to a shul because he wants to have his name on the shul. His parents' name on the shul. He wants to have his parents' name on the shuls. Ilu Nishmas, his parents. So he sells it to the shul because it's a Tevas Anah for him. Because now the shul is looking to buy. The shul is going to buy, needs a place to buy. And they come and he says, I'm willing to sell it to you. Maybe I'll give you a small discount, but I want, or whatever it is, I want my name, I want a plaque in the shul for the parents, or for somebody, the schus, whatever it is. So that is a valid reason.
How do you define saying shocking and
It's not valid reason. It's not that you have a benefit from it. Because if you have a benefit from it, by you selling it to the matzrin, you're losing something. So there's a hefset to the moicher. If there's a hefset to the moicher or hefset to somebody, there's no more bar metzra. Vasisa yasher v'atoiv is that there is absolutely no loss to anybody in the process, and Sachakol, the Torah tells you, you're not losing anything from it. You could go find another property somewhere else, so, move on. Take a different land. Yeah, and that's what's mashma from the Prisha, because if he has something which will cause him something which he's doing it for a specific reason, that without it he will have a hefsed, that's already, there's no more din of bar metzra. Yeah, so we say there is bar metzra even if he says he doesn't want to sell to him, if there's no specific reason, and the matzrin comes and removes the lekeach out of it. Now what happens if the seller, and he says he's making a t'nai with the lekeach, that what's the t'nai with the lekeach? That the mechira is only kayam if he's not going to transfer it to the matzrin. So Mishpat Shalom, the Marsham, Mishpat Shalom starts on the Siman, and this is considered a big, the main poskim when it comes to the Simanim. The book Mishpat Shalom begins in Siman, in Dinei Matzronis, and this over here. And he right away, Mishpat Shalom was a classic on Dinei Matzronis. He starts and he says that if goes a whole discussion. He says, is it the Masna Masha Kosev Batayra? You guys already know it from last year from Evan Azer. We learned about Kedushin, Milchus Kedushin. Is it considered the Masna Masha Kosev Batayra? Is not considered Masna Masha Kosev Batayra or not? Does the T'nai does work or does the T'nai not? He brings to the Machne Ephraim and the Meknesset Agdela. It's obviously that T'nai does not work. And there is the Bar Metzra. And he goes into a discussion if by Nishba he made a shvur that he's only going to sell to him and not to the Matzah, and does it work or not? Also doesn't work. Why? Because he did sell to him. Yeah? So now, Avnei Choshen says, doesn't understand what the Sof... Huh?
What if he's mashpia on the lekech that he's not going to give it to the Matzah?
So what means mashpia on him not to give it to him? They take him to the tent, take it away from him. Huh? If he's mashpia the lekech. So the Avnei Choshen says, he doesn't understand the whole kasha b'chlal. The Avnei Choshen says, I don't understand what the Mishpat Shalom has a Safek b'chlal. He says, how can I make a Tanai with him about a third party? Who's the Baldin over here? The Matzah. You didn't make, I can't make a Shvur or a Tanai with you about another somebody else. If I make a Shvur or a Tanai with the Matzah, there's one thing. If I make a Shvur and a Tanai with Lokeach, the Matzah,
Matzah's Lokeach is predicated on the fact that it's sold.
Right, so the Matzah, the fact is, but the Avnei Choshen says, that you so therefore you can't do it to lose the matzah elamai. The only way it works is if the moicher made a tanai with the lekeach that the mechira is only chal, the mechira is nisbatel. Not that the mechira is al tanai, you're not going to pass it. He tells him, I'm selling it to you, and there's a condition in the sale. The condition in the sale is that it's only valid, the sale only kicks in if you hold on to it. If you transfer the property to somebody else, the mechira is retroactively invalidated and it goes back to me. So it's a mechira al tanai. Then it works. Avnei Choshen says, then it works. Because then you're not making him a tanai on him doing something.
Huh? I mean, it was that it's a tanai and mechira that you're not going to transfer it?
Yes, yes.
Which means that the mechira is going to go... The same thing. No, the mechira is going to be spot.
No, because I didn't say that. I'm not making a tanai in the mechira. I'm selling it to you on condition. I'm telling you, you cannot transfer it. But if I'm saying it to you in that lashon, depends what lashon it is. If I'm telling you that the mechira is at night, that the matzah is not going to take it from you.
What's the difference? In both cases, you disobeyed the time. The mechira is the spirit, right?
Depends how the mechira was done. If the mechira is if the t'nai in the mechira, mamash in the mechira, that's what the Choshen says. It says if you specify the t'nai in a specific way, the mechira becomes batel. Otherwise, then it works, and the karka goes back to the moicher. Now, what happens if a person does a shvuah? The seller does a shvuah, I'm only going to sell it to this person. So the Mishpat Shalom has a suffix. Does a shvuah kick in or not? The Shach says, we already know that if a person does a shvuah, he says it depends if it's a kinyan or not a kinyan, etc. Yeah? The Avnei Choshen says that it's not so. The mechira does work, even if he does a shvuah. Even if he does a shvuah that he's only selling it to this guy, that's perfect. The shvuah kicked in. The moicher only sold it to the lekeach. It's fine. Now the matzah comes. It makes sense. The matzah comes and takes it away from him. But if the bezdin sees that the only reason why the moicher sold the property is because he did a shvuah in the past, so he's bound by his shvuah. Yeah, like if you learn Gittin, if we wouldn't have to cancel Gittin, you would get to it in this year, but get Musa, so he's a Mechira Musa, only doing it because of the Shvuah. So if I only did it because of the Shvuah, then, and without the Shvuah, I wouldn't have sold it B'chlal. Not that I wanted to sell it and I made a Shvuah, I'm only selling it to him. I was stuck with the Shvuah. Whatever reason I made a Shvuah. I was stuck with the Shvuah. And without the Shvuah, I wouldn't have sold it B'chlal. So then, in such a case, the Avnei Choshen says it's considered like a matane, and the matzon has no schus for it whatsoever. The Avnei Choshen. The Mechaber continues if the value of the land goes up. No, then the Mechaber over here says that how does it work over here? The Eidei Hakinyan that were hired by the lekeach are the ones that are going to sign a new shtar from the lekeach to the matzrin, and there's no need for a new kinyan because the lekeach is a shliach of the matzrin, and from that, the Heintik Achronim say that means that the obligation of transferring title with whatever cost it incurred is on the lekeach, not on the matzrin. That specific amount is only on the lekeach. Yeah. Because this specific is something which a cost which he did, which be'etzim he did it as a shliach to him. So he's, because that's what Shulchan Aruch says. You're using why does the same edim don't get paid by the matzrin? So it just says that the eidei halekeach should be the ones doing the new shtar. Same reason. That's the one little thing that he has to do. Transfer registration is not that much.
So he had no fee to go find out if the matzah wants to buy it.
Right, so that says that's part of this. That little part, that little transferring is not paying transfer taxes and all these things. I'm talking about the cost of the transfer, of the registration. Mechaber continues, if the value of the land goes up, the seller could still only sell, the lekeach could only sell it to the matzrin at the price that he paid for it. If the value goes down, he doesn't have to lose from it. The matzrin wants it, the matzrin has to pay whatever the price was paid by the lekeach, only if he wants it. If he doesn't want it, goodbye. What does the Smeh says? What's mashma from this? Smeh says, because what's going to happen if I bought a house for $1 million and then the housing market collapsed and now the house is only worth 500. So the matzrin is going to come to me. I'm going to want to be koiver the matzrin to buy it for $1 million because they state in Shulchan Aruch that he has to pay the original price. So that says no, imirza. If he wants to buy it, he has to pay the full price. But you can't force him. You can't force the matzrin to purchase the property at the higher price. If you did hashbacha if you fixed and you made the whole karka much better, so then the Shulchan Aruch says it depends if you did it before. If you did it before the matzin was teveya the land, it's considered like Yored B'Rishus. Yored B'Rishus, the business does a shuma how much you invested and you get back, and you get it back, means you get deducted from the amount that you get extra money for what you made the karka better. And if it's after you get called to Bezdin, after Tavoy Amatzron, then it's Yored Shaloi B'Rishus. Depends. It's later in Choshen Mishpat, you'll see there's different dinim by Yored Shaloi B'Rishus. When the hashbacha you do get, when hashbacha you don't get. It depends what it's made for. The Pischei Choshen explains the logic behind it. He says, why are you considered a Yored B'Rishus before because according to logic you should not do anything because you're a shliach of the matzah. That's what Shulchan Aruch says. You're a shliach of the matzah. So what's the svara that before that you're considered a Yored B'Rishus? Because up until there is a tviyah, you don't know if the matzah is coming and going to ask you for it or not. And the tviyah period is very little. Later in Shulchan Aruch you're going to get to it. That it's a few days, a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever. If the guy's out of town, a few more days, but not much more than that. So you have a very small window for the matzon to come and start a claim. So you're a shliach for him. So why is that? He says no. Up until then you're suffering if he's going to come or not. So if it's suffering he's going to come or not, you're essentially somewhat of an owner in it until the guy comes and makes a tviyah. Then you become a shliach, and he proves it from and it becomes from the Erech HaShulchan. The Erech HaShulchan brings the name of the Rashbash, that if the koine, the lekeach is a gvar alam, so the matzrin can't get it out of him, and therefore he couldn't buy it right away, but he wanted to and he couldn't. So the din of the bar mitzvah doesn't get cancelled until this bully gets put in his place and he's ready to sell. Not only that, the lekeach has to pay rent aside from paying the full price. Aside for getting paid the full price, you deduct the rent per month of this land until the karka is transferred to the matzrin. But the Rashbash said that until the day of the tviyah, the karka is his. The lekeich's karka. He's not a shliach. So based on this Rashbash, that's what the Pischei Choshen says, that's what's considered Yored B'Rishus. Choshen ve'ephod brings Choshen ve'ephod is a thin book on Dinei Matzronos, not such an old book, probably, I don't know, 80, 90 years ago. And over there, I think it's 89 years ago, and over there he says that it's not from when you do a Tviyah and Bezdin. Tviyah and Bezdin means nothing. It's from when you bring a bag of cash to Bezdin. You put the money in Bezdin, that's already considered that you're a serious buyer, not just talk. I'm going to get a mortgage, I'll try to get a mortgage, we'll see what's going to happen. Choshen ve'ephod. Now, what happens if a person was moitzi moment for lashbiach hakarka, but he wasn't mashbiach the karka? That means the person spent money, but it didn't create a value. Why didn't it create a value? For whatever reason. Well, you made a shuma and the value didn't go up. Yes, it cost me $2,000 because I have a big thing to plow everything, not to plow everything, because it's exactly the time when you have to do it, and or even to mow all the grass. It's a big place, but that's a cost which didn't make the value of the karka more. So then the Mishpat Shalom says it's a suffix. If it's a suffix, you go, Yotzor is without shevach.
Why is it a suffix? Why should the bar mitzvah have to pay for it?
Why should the matzah have to pay for it? Because it's something which was done for the purpose of the karka, but didn't make the karka better. If I mowed the lawn, I took a massive field. It cost me $2,000 to bring a company to take care of the lawn. Why? Because it's the beginning of spring, and if I'm going to wait a week until they're going to get to 2 weeks, there are going to be weeds and grass and everything else, and the birds are going to come eat. There's going to be things. So I had to take care of it. There's the shuma of it is the Bezdin is going to value. It's going to be $1 million today, $1 million tomorrow. It's not $1 million in 2000. Does he have? Could the leikeach be teveya from the matzren? Say you have to pay me $1 million plus the $2,000 I spent. Yeah, he was moitzi yitzos, but he wasn't mashbiach. There was no hashbacha that could be. So that's a shaila. So the Mishpat Shalom says it's a machlekes, it's a suffix. Suffix, you go after the muhzak. The muhzak could say kimli that I could hold on to the money. And he's not machriya who the muhzak is. He just says, look later in the next sif, you're going to see who the muhzak is. If we look later in the next sif, and sif zayin, in the smeh, that the leikeach, in certain times, the leikeach is considered the muhzak until he transfers it. Yeah, it doesn't. The Mishpat Shalom doesn't clearly say that. But the Choshen ve'ephod says, no, 1 second, the matzrin is for sure not the muhzak. So it doesn't tell you that the leikeach is the muhzak. So who is the muhzak? So we have to kick back to the erech hashulchan, which we discussed before, that if this hashbacha happened, and which erech hashulchan based on Shulchan Aruch, if the hashbacha happened if the hoitzois happened before the tviyah to Bezdin, then obviously the leikeach is the muhzak. If the hoitzois happened after the tviyah to Bezdin, or after the bringing of the money, then we can zagen that the matzin becomes the muhzak. The Mechaber says, but if you cause damage to the property, it makes no difference if it's before, if it's after, you still deduct it from the sale price. If he was achal peiris, he has to pay for it. It depends if it was before the matzrin brought money or after the matzrin brought money. If he ate the peiris, that's the Shulchan Aruch over there says. And the Mishpat Shalom brings a kasha, chkira, what happens if it was time to cut the fruits off the tree? And I took all the fruits off the tree, and now I put them into my property. Could the guy come and say to me, you took the fruits are yours, this $20,000 worth of apples in your storage house, according to Shulchan Aruch, the peiros were mine, and you took the peiros down, pay me $20,000 of the peiros, you didn't eat them. Or could the guy say, I ate 2 apples, that's 50 cents. The rest of it, take your truck and take your fruits, take your apples. Zayma gesund, nothing to do with me. So the Mishpat Shalom says it says in Tzarechim. Doesn't say. Then the Mishpat Shalom brings another Tzarechim, another thing. Also similar, what happens if I bought the property, I'm the lekeach, and I went and I rented it out to somebody else. I rented the property, I didn't buy it for a living, I rented it, and then I signed a lease with somebody for, it's a house, I signed a lease for a 3-year lease, 5-year lease, a business, I signed a 5-year lease. It's an extension, I got paid already some of the money. So first of all, could the guy come and say, the matzon come and says, take the soicher out, it's your headache, or not? And if not, could he tell him, take the soicher out, or could he tell him, or does he could just give him the money and say, here's the rent that I got paid first and last month, and 2 more months that I got paid, or 1 month that I got paid, take it and go. And he also leaves it in tzarich iyun. But the Choshen Ve'ifrit says, no, the soicher gets out of there. And it's mashma from the Choshen Ve'ifrit that the buyer shoulders the responsibility to pay the soicher back, whatever, if you pay the rent, because he's the one who got the money, so he has to give back the money to the soicher. What?
Could he force the lekeach to get rid of the soicher?
He says he forces the lekeach out. He forces the soicher out. The Mechaber concludes the Seif, the lekeach borrows money and took a loan on the land, took a mortgage on the karka, then the choiv is not chal on the karka. And the Smer right away explains Imanushach. If the matzon already gave, he says, even if the matzon already gave money to the lekeach, and then the lekeach became his shliach, he could take the money that he got and pay the loan, so then the loan doesn't stay on the land. And if he didn't give the matzon, if he didn't give the lekeach the money yet, also the choiv does not chal on the karka. Why? Because the Baal Choiv could come and receive his loan from the money that the matzon is going to give the lekeach. Therefore, there's no choiv on the karka. Comes if Zion discusses different prices. The lekeach bought it for 100. The value of the property is 200. Shulchan Aruch says very simple: if the moicher would sell it to everybody else for 100, then the matzon pays the lekeach only 100. If the moicher would clearly only sold it to this lekeach for 100, but everybody else would sell it at full price at 200, then the matzon pays the lekeach 200. If there's a machlokes between them, the matzon has to bring a raya. And the Smer says, why does a matzon have to bring a raya? Because in this case, the kuli alma the lekeach is the muchzak. Even though in other places the machlokes who's the muchzak, lekeach or the matzon, over here the kuli alma the lekeach is the muchzak in this concept of how much has to be paid to him. So if the matzon wants to claim that the moicher would have not sold it to everybody for 100, therefore he wants it for 100. And the lekeach says, no, he only sold it to me for 100, not for anybody else. Then you look at it, why is that? He says, because over here, usually people don't sell at fire sale for so cheap. Obviously, he sold it to him because he likes him. Specific reason for it. The Mishpat Shalom brings from the Knesset Agdeilah, brings from the Radbaz, an example. What's the example of it? He said he sold to his doctor for cheaper. So obviously, it's because he likes him. And he wouldn't sell it to anybody else. Comes the Shoshanas Yaakov with a big question on this whole sif. He says, I don't understand the whole logic. He brings a kasha from the Shita Mekubetz's kasha on this Gemara. What's the Shita Mekubetz's kasha on this Gemara? What's the whole Yisod of Bar Metzrah? The lekeach could go and purchase the same land somewhere else, while the matzon cannot purchase it anywhere else. The lekeach, even if this seller would have sold it to everybody for 100, the lekeach is not buying this land anywhere else for 100. So why is there bar metzra over here? There's no yosher v'atoiv. What yosher v'atoiv is there? I'm going to take a field out of the lekeach for 100, and the lekeach will not be able to buy an equal field in this city for 100 again. In a different place. There's no yosher v'atoiv.
Who's giving the 200 to
the lekeach? The meicher is out of the picture already.
Then you can take the 200 now. He gets an extra 100, he takes 900, buy the field.
Who? If he's not, if the meicher would sell to everybody for 100, then it's 100. So, l'chayre, you should compare it to matana. By a matana, we know in Sif Yudches that there's no din of the bar mitzvah. So the Mishpat Shalom explains, not the Mishpat, Shoshan Yaakov explains, Bashkafa Rishayna, it's not daimit a matana. Why? A matana is when I specifically want to give a gift to this specific person. Only to this person. When I'm selling it to everybody for 100, it's not a specific sale it's not a specific sale to this person. That's why you're getting it for 100. So that's not compared to matana, and therefore it's not the same thing. But he says, but my son, he says, came up with a better teretz. So Shanas Yaakov says, my son says that Pashut, the Chachamim did not, the Chachamim when they made Takanim for Metzah is loy plug. There's loy plug in these specific to go into every detail. Will the lekeach, it's the concept, the lekeach could purchase another land, another place. If there's a sale and there's a purchase, and no, not matana, so there's a sale and a purchase, and sale and a purchase elsewhere also. Chachamim loy plug in specifics. And technically could be that just like this person needed a fire sale, it could be another person needs a fire sale. If the economy is bad, well, not only this person will sell for cheap, somebody else could also sell for cheap. That's the answer Shanas Yaakov. Pamanizov asks from a different angle. He says, being that you sold for a half price because you like him, man, Lamer Zogan.
No, he likes me.
Like him, he sold for half a price, and we must say there must have been a reason he wanted to sell it. So maybe we should say Palga Mecher, Palga Matana. Because really it's worth 200. He sold him for 100 and gave him half, and the other half is a matana. So then there shouldn't be bar mitzvah bichlal. Even if you only sold it to him because of oyavoy. Because of oyavoy. Sold him because of oyavoy. And the matzah can't even come with 200. Because there's no bar mitzvah by a matana. It's half a matana. There's no bar mitzvah. So he says, no. He says, it's clear that the din of matana is only when it's kuli matana, not when it's a half a matana. When it's half a matana, it's still din of bar mitzvah. And he proves that from the Sefer Zechor Lavram. Zechor Lavram says that if it's partial matana, even though the Ramah in Chuvas is mashma that it does work, and it's mashma from the Ramah that there was a trick that they would do. They would sell a property to avoid bar mitzvah. What would they do? They would sell a property for $1 million, and they would say the property is worth 1.2, selling it to you for $1 million and gifting you 200. And that way they would get the guy out. And it's mashma from the Ramah that it works. For the Mechaber, it's mashma from the Ramah, it doesn't work. Zechor Lavram says it makes no sense. So the Pamoin Azov, and that's what the Mechaber says the Ramah and Sivit Ches doesn't work. So Zechor Lavram disagrees with the Ramah and says it doesn't make any sense. The Pamoin Azov paskins like the Zechor Lavram that in such a case, even if you're going to say it's a half a matana, it's still dinner the bar mitzvah. I want to conclude with something very interesting that I saw in the book Vayalaket Yosef. In the beginning of the Siman about bar mitzvah, the first thing brings from Mahari Ayash, that obviously the bar mitzvah is only when the two lands are equal. They're the same thing. One is a field, one is a field. Yeah, that's the examples he brings. But if there's a field of grain on the right, and next to it is a property that has a store or warehouse, and then the property of the warehouse gets sold, and to somebody else, there's no din of the bar mitzvah. Why? We're not going to say that the purchaser is going to go and knock it down and make a soda or make a house out of it. We're going to say, if he bought the warehouse, he bought it to be a warehouse. So therefore, you would have no use from it. So therefore, there's no din of the bar mitzvah. And from that, it's mashma also, from the hymn, it could be medayek different ways. Now, what happens if it's both of them are Mari Ayash, in the beginning of Vayalaket Yosef? So it comes from that, you have an interesting din. What happens if you have two warehouses, one next to another? It's the same thing. One guy sells a warehouse. The other guy comes and says, bar mitzvah. L'chayr, bar mitzvah should apply, because it's two warehouses. What happens if you have the guy that doesn't have the warehouse is the one selling, the guy with the empty field? So now the guy with the warehouse comes and says, even though it's not equal, yes, according to Maria Yash, I'm not going to knock down a warehouse, but to put up a warehouse, I could. And for me, it's important to have a big warehouse, I have a warehouse, small warehouse. I want to expand my business. I have a store, I have a restaurant. I'll make it double the size. Do we say bar mitzvah or not? I don't know. But it seems there's something to be done. And with that we conclude. And the Emir Hashem will be mamshech on Tuesday or Thursday, I'm not sure.